start recording. I see that you have your microphones on mute. Can you just indicate, maybe unmute for a second, just let me know that you can hear me before we get started? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh,
I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Wonderful. All right. And I'm going to pause at various times to get feedback and to ask for your questions. And rather than take time, if it's okay right now, to introduce everyone, maybe when we have questions come up, you can just pause and introduce yourself and the organization you represent at that time. Would that be okay? So I'm Bernadette Orr, and I am a consultant with the Essex County Community Foundation. And I really very much appreciate your interest in the program and in joining us today. So thanks very much for that. Today we're going to be talking about building the board that you need and creating the board you want. This is about creating an environment where people are excited to be part of your board, because quite honestly, it's not just getting people to the table that matters, but keeping them there. And so we'll be talking about all that it takes to create an outstanding board. I'm going to give you some time to reflect on what your own board currently is like. I hope that we'll have some opportunity to share with one another, hear about others' experiences, and ask questions. And considering that we're meeting in person next week, I want to give you some time to develop your own pitch and think about how you can strengthen your ability to bring new people to the table. So why don't we get started? I'd like to ask people to please put your microphones back on mute, if you can, until it's time for questions. Yeah, so please mute your microphones. Otherwise, I think there's a way for me to mute all, but if you can handle it at your end, that would be great. So it's time to think differently about how we do our recruiting. And what I want to suggest that people think about is what makes our board a great experience for all of our members. The more that we create the kind of board we want, the more likely we are to be able to bring people and retain people as part of that board. So what are people looking for when they are thinking about joining a board? They're looking for an opportunity to give their time to an organization they really care about. They want to make sure that that organization stays strong and viable. They want to be able to be part of the organization's success. They want to know how a nonprofit functions, how it produces value for the community, and particularly if you're thinking about trying to recruit younger people or people at earlier stages in their careers, frequently board service is a way for them to do their own professional development, to get to know other board members, and to get to know the organization's ED and staff. Okay, so I have to pause here for a moment and ask people to please mute your microphones. Okay. I've muted all the lines, and then when it's time for questions, I will reopen them. And that way we can make sure that nobody is distracted by background noise. So I'd like to just mention that we tend to have a default, which is to think about looking for people for our boards who can be strong financial supporters. And in general, board members need to know and should expect, of course, that making the organization a top philanthropic priority for them is an expectation of all board members. Nevertheless, people do not join a board in order to be donors, and you don't have to be on a board in order to be a donor. So financial support is typically not a, oops, I'm so sorry. What happened here? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry about that. Financial support is not typically the reason why people join a board. And if you begin or lead with your pitch and even your thinking about who you're interested in with regard to thinking about an expectation of financial support, that's really going down the wrong path. It's not likely to bring new people and a more diverse set of folks around your table. So how do we think about recruitment? Well, recruitment is a strategy that's to help you get the board you want and you need. And you can't get started on a strategy without understanding where we are today and where we want to be. Once you know where you want to be, in terms of who you want around your table, how you want them to engage, how you're going to bring them on board, how you're going to keep them engaged, then you can come up with a path for how you're going to get there. So what is your pitch and how do you rate against the competition? It's really important to remember that qualified and engaged members of your community are a valuable commodity that other organizations are also interested in recruiting. So in order for them to be attracted to your cause, you need to be able to perfect your own pitch as to why your board is an exciting and engaging place for them to be. You want to be able to retain them, and everything after getting their interest is about making their experience valuable. So what is it about boards that people appreciate and especially find engaging? Well, the best boards have an open and constructive partnership with the executive director. They take time to deliberate issues and hear all sides before making key decisions. They serve as a brain trust. They don't serve as a rubber stamp. They ensure that the organization has qualified leadership, and they ensure that that leadership is regularly reviewed and evaluated by the board. They have people who show up, and I don't mean just physically, but people who are really engaged. They think strategically, they're focused on mission, they stay in touch with the community, and they ensure that everybody at the table has a voice. But where do boards typically fall short? Well, there's lots of different reasons why the board experience often doesn't measure up, right? But here are some of them. There's too much information, there's too little time, there isn't really a discussion environment in the boardroom, it's all reports. Organizations can be too close to the executive director, the boards can be too close to the executive director, or there can be tension with the executive director. Similarly, the boards can be very hands-on, micromanaging, or they can be very hands-off. And in that case, it doesn't have a feeling of how board members understand how to be able to be involved. That leads to a lack of engagement. There can be a lack of accountability, and generally a sense that there isn't a lot of meaning attached to being on the board. When we look at how boards and EDs relate, this graphic is a somewhat simplified version of looking at 4 different sort of domains where the vertical axis is the role of the executive director and the horizontal axis is the role of the board. And what we really want is for boards and EDs to work together in a constructive partnership over here in quadrant 3. But there are a variety of things that get in the way of that. So here are some very common sources of tension that show up between executives and boards. So you might hear executives say that the board members don't know how to stay in their lane, or that their staff feel judged or rather than supported. Again, this focus of engagement, that board members are not engaged, that board members get so tied up with fiduciary responsibilities that they miss the strategic needs that the organization has. Board members don't step up, or they come up with ideas, but they expect staff to implement them. And meanwhile, for their part, you might have board members who say, our meetings are not engaging, we just updated. we get to big decisions after the fact, or we get surprised, and we don't like surprises. We don't get to work around the bad news. The ED doesn't trust us to work with the challenges and the bad news. Maybe we don't know one another well enough. So there is very little trust in our boardroom. Or strong voices dominate and the rest of us just stay quiet. So it would be helpful to reflect on how common these sources of tension or miscommunication are within your board. And again, this is because we want you to be able to develop a pitch to others that is really based on fact and that sets you up for success when new people show up and come to your board table. What's the culture that they're going to encounter once they arrive? Some good practices that can help to minimize tension and set you up for productivity are a clear set of expectations for board members, both existing and new, opportunities for real engagement, and around substantive issues. Obviously, communication is key, the key to everything. Carefully reviewing your committee structure. For example, do you have committees that actually work and function, or are the committees just held over from previous phases of your organizational existence? In other words, are committees a place where people feel that they can make a real contribution, or once again, are they a place where people don't feel that there is a tremendous amount of meaning? Basically, good meeting practices in all of these settings help to create engaged members, and that builds a better and more productive board. So how does your board perform? It might be helpful for you to think about answering or filling out the rest of this sentence, right? What makes our board a rewarding place to spend our time and to share our skills is. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to unmute for a moment and just see if folks would like to jump in and share a little bit about what makes your board a rewarding place to spend time. And again, if you do have something to say, if you could just introduce yourself first and say what organization you represent. Would anyone like to share something here?
I'll jump in. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Anya. I'm from Essex Heritage or Essex National Heritage Commission. And I think a rewarding piece for our board members is that our organization has a wide range of activities. Our organization works with historic, cultural, and natural heritage. So anything from supporting trail work to historic houses and museums, to cultural events and activities, and then the type of operations we do with grants, teacher education programs, tourism activities, awareness activities, things like that. Board members have a wide range of stuff to get involved in. So it can attract a really interesting range of people. So people who are in the museum studies field, or people who just live in Essex County and love exploring different places. We've had some interesting associations with, oh yeah, we moved to Essex County and we found the Trails and Sales Guide and discovered some cool places, and now I'm involved as a board member. So I think it's rewarding for our board members to have the wide range of activities that they can get excited about.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, you know, part of what we find that people tend to do when they talk about their boards frequently is to stay at a very high level around, you know, what's the mission of our organization. And I really like that you're talking at a level of detail of how can people really get involved, and what is it that they can, you know, what are the different aspects of what our organization does that people can actually get connected to when they take up a role on our board. So that's very helpful. Is there anyone else who'd like to share here about what makes their board a rewarding place to spend time?
Sure, I can jump in. My name is Robert Lowell. I'm the Executive Director of the YMCA of Metro North Torigian branch right here at Peabody. And for us, so I lead an advisory committee that has been dormant for about 2 years. So I think what's exciting about this opportunity is that the current roster really has an opportunity to create the structure of the future advisory board.
Can you say a little bit more about that? What will that mean for your organization?
So right now, as I mentioned, the board was dormant. And so when I came on board, there were 3 members, legacy members, and then I brought in 5 new members. And so quite honestly, we've only had 4 meetings. And one of those meetings was to introduce the new CEO. And the second was to introduce the new strategic plan. So the next piece for the board is to really look at the strategic plan and start to determine how we can localize our efforts to be aligned with that.
Yeah, so that is very exciting, and it gives your new board members an opportunity to be deeply engaged, right? And formulating not only the future of the board, but then how that board. Let's never forget that the whole reason we're sitting around a board table is because we're trying to further the mission of the organization. So that's an exciting moment for the why.
Yep, it sure is.
Yeah. Anyone else who wants to say something before we move on?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
Hello? Yes,
Sure,
my name is Patricia Ho, and I am board president of the House of the Seven Gables. We have ongoing board training. There is some kind of board in-servicing or board topic that is offered during every meeting and also at our board retreat. But I think what really makes this a rewarding and valuable experience is that we have a very productive and trusting relationship with our executive director, and our board respects the staff roles, respects our relationships with our staff, and really the other way around also. There is a mutual feeling that we're each doing our jobs and we take pride in doing them well. At our meetings, I think there is a balance of not only encouragement to participate in strategic and visionary ideas and to give that kind of direction to the Gables, but also in receiving reports and understanding the progress of the strategic plan through our discussions with our exec.
Patricia, thank you so much for that. You've given me a great lead in to the next slides, which are basically, you're going to find that, most of you are probably doing things in a really positive way and are going to find these to be somewhat not as helpful as necessary. But let's just take a look at the next couple of things here. As Patricia mentioned, staff really don't need board members to redo their work or jump over the ED's head to manage them. And EDs are not looking for boards to manage their staff or just take up time at board meetings with no purpose. For example, if you have a functioning finance committee that's done a really good job of reviewing the financials, there's really no need to take up time in a board meeting to relitigate everything that was already done at the finance committee. It is important for everyone to understand the big picture financials, where are we headed and what are the things we're worried about, what are the things we feel proud of. But when people don't have another way of engaging, then frequently some bad habits tend to creep in. And it sounds like many of you have created really positive environments for engagement, and that's what's going to attract people to your board and to want to stay in part of your board. When boards are doing their jobs, they're able to do this list of things, right? Provide big picture thinking, engage on the strategy, definitely pay attention to the strong financial footing of the organization, pay attention to leadership succession, and be part of how that organization connects to the community. And of course, many of you are on this call and engaged in this program because you're paying attention to the fact that you need to be responsible for your own leadership succession and building a pipeline of new board members coming on. So what happens in the boardroom is really the heart of what keeps people at the table. And as this red list of items goes up, you'll find that productivity in your boardroom declines. So the basic bottom line here is, what elephant is in your boardroom? And to the degree that any of these symptoms are showing up, they will diminish the impact of what your board is trying to achieve. So it's really helpful as you go into conversations with prospective board members that you're able to ask and be prepared to answer the question of what are we doing to create engagement in a typical board meeting. And here's sort of a quick checklist of things that you can be thinking about that will give you a self-assessment on that topic. Who's speaking? Who's asking questions? What happens when there are disagreements? How are decisions handled? What happens when someone doesn't understand or needs clarification? What about some of the real basics, right? Does everyone in a group know one another's names? That seems like a no-brainer, and yet there are boards that are so perfunctory that when people come into the room, not everybody knows one another's name. Is everyone in the group even clear about why you're meeting and what the purpose of the conversation is? Think about your meeting agendas and the minutes that are created out of those. You can look back and do an agenda review and to see how much time are we devoting to reports versus discussion. I like that, I believe it was Patricia who mentioned that reports are important and we also have time on our agendas for discussion of some strategic issues. Do you use a consent agenda? The purpose of a consent agenda where there's a bundle of materials, it could be last meeting minutes and maybe some reports that don't need further discussion can be bundled and accepted with a very simple up or down vote. That will open up more space on the agenda to get into some of the topics that really need the board engagement. Who's doing most of the speaking? Is it staff presenting out? Is it committee chairs presenting out on materials that people can read in advance? Or is it all of the board members getting involved and talking about issues that matter? Clearly, there are some very specific and simple things to do to take a look at your agendas to make sure that you have the important items up front and you allow enough time for discussion. And even consider whether using executive session on a regular basis, that is a session where only board members are present and not the executive director. If you use that opportunity on a regular basis, it builds more trust and confidence among board members so that they know one another and feel that they can speak up in a setting where there might be disagreement or at least a difference of opinion. Again, preparing to speak with recruits, ask and be able to answer, how have we built community on our board? And here are some different examples of things that you can be doing to build community, from creating the simplest of name cards so everyone knows one another's name, having food at board meetings, helping with childcare if necessary or technology, but also, is there a guide to the most commonly used acronyms in your organization? What kind of orientation are you providing for new members? How are you onboarding them? What is the board's role in providing that orientation, or is it all on staff? What kind of activities do you have inside and outside the boardroom that allow people to connect with one another? Are there opportunities, for example, for them to volunteer together at within your organization? Are there regular retreats? I heard a couple of you mention retreats, and that's another way for people to take some additional time, both to get to know one another, but also to engage around the critical issues. How are you helping your board members stay connected to mission? Sometimes we can get caught up on a board with the minutia or with the details of working on a specific project or a specific financial challenge, and begin to lose sight of the fact that we joined this organization because we care about mission. So being able to keep mission front and center is a really important way that people continue to feel engaged. That's what drew people to your board in the first place, and you want to make sure that they continue to feel that they are part of making the organization successful and part of helping it to stay focused on mission. So what are some ways to do that in the boardroom? A very simple check-in around important decisions where it reflects back to the mission. How is this decision going to impact our mission? Is an important way that you can help to ensure that the focus on mission stays front and center. Don't make assumptions that everyone has the same understanding of mission. Sometimes there are different interpretations, sometimes because of a change in the organization, such as was mentioned at the Y, for example. It's an opportunity to really re-embrace the mission. So making sure that everybody has an opportunity on a regular basis to sort of reconnect with those fundamentals is an incredibly valuable thing you can do. And getting out of the boardroom, right, to attend meetings in the community, to volunteer, to visit programs, something that was mentioned around the House of Seven Gables. That's a big way for people to feel connected to the organization, what it's doing, and how it's delivering on its mission. So let's go back to recruitment, because I know that your desire to have new board members is what brought you to this program in the first place. So the basic premise here is that to the degree that you build your board as a place where people feel excited, engaged, connected, it's going to attract and keep people who are looking for exactly that type of experience. And it's helpful for you to be able to think a little bit differently about what you need in the boardroom. You may not be in this place, but many times when I've been interacting with boards, they tend to kind of default to a sort of a checklist of we need a particular type of individual with certain types of professional skills. For example, we need a lawyer, or we need a finance person, or we need somebody who understands fundraising. And my premise here is that skills, obviously, not everyone in your community can be an attorney. And if you need an attorney, you need a relationship with an attorney that's not easily replaced by somebody else. But is it the fact that your attorney is on the board, or are there other ways for you to get the services you need and be thinking about bringing board members to the table who have the desire and commitment to engage? And learning about your organization, how it functions, being able to read financials, all of those things can actually be taught. What is not easily created, if it doesn't already exist, is the will and the excitement to be engaged and to be part of the leadership of the organization. So thinking a little bit differently about the type of individuals you need will help you to build the board that you want. And here I'm going to, for a second, show you a different type of matrix. So let me just move over to, can you see this board recruitment matrix? It has areas of expertise and also brings you into looking beyond resources into what are the community connections that this person brings? What is their personal style? Obviously, we have the other demographics around age, gender, race, ethnicity, And this list can be expanded depending on what kind of organization you are. So for example, it might be important to you to have people of different abilities. It might be important to you to have people of different sexual orientations. It might be important to you to have people who have a first language other than English, depending again on who you serve and whether you want your board to be reflective, how much you want your board to be reflective of the community that you serve. So thinking about how to take a matrix like this and make it personalized to your specific organization is another important way that you can think about recruitment in a different type of way. We can send you, we're going to send you after this presentation ends, a copy of that matrix. And again, that's just one tool and there are others. So you can do some searching online and find other types of matrices, but that particular one comes from BoardSource, which is a really excellent source of information about helping boards function at their peak, especially in the nonprofit sector. If you want to have different types of people on your board, you'll have to be doing things differently, right? And recruiting people in new ways. So here are just some really basic ideas about how to think about recruitment. Thinking about community members who have benefited from services that you provide or have direct lived experience that's relevant to what you provide. Thinking about creating new types of volunteer opportunities. Volunteers to your organization can often become very, very good and devoted board members. Are you doing enough to create those different types of volunteer opportunities that bring different types of people into contact with your organization? What kind of networks are you tapping to get the word out about your organization? Frequently, we rely exclusively on the networks of the existing people around the table. And again, if we want different results, we're going to have to do things differently. So some of what we might want to do is join a program such as this one. I applaud you all for being part of that, but also reaching out to other nonprofits, maybe to faith institutions, thinking about organizations you know that have very active volunteers, and just thinking differently about how to get the word out that you are looking for board members. The marketing staff inside your organization can be very helpful here. It doesn't have to be a secret or some kind of opaque process. In fact, it should be a very transparent process that you're going through to bring new people onto your board. And there is absolutely no reason why you can't spread the word very widely that you're looking to bring new people onto your board. And at that point, it becomes an exercise where you as board members need to think carefully about what your screening and selection process will be. But the first step is to let as many people as possible know that you're looking and that you have an exciting opportunity for people to be part of. And then think about how you will, from those different candidates, make your selection of who you'd like to have around your table. So again, it's not what people do, but who they are that's going to make your the biggest contribution to your success. You can use your committees and your task forces as ways to create a pathway to service. And by that, I mean, you can have people on committees who have not made a commitment to being full board members. And many organizations find that this is a great way to build a pipeline. The committee is less of a commitment. People can get a taste for board service. The board and the organization can get to know that individual in a very focused and time-bound way. And then after maybe a year of serving on a committee, there could be an opportunity for somebody to be considered as a potential board member. So that's a really good way for people to build a pipeline into their existing practices. We'd like to ask that you take a survey prior to coming to our gathering next week. And I believe this link has already been mailed to you. This presentation will be mailed to you, and the link is in the presentation as well. The survey will help us to create a profile of you and your organization, which we can then share with the individuals who are going to be joining us that evening, so that everybody has some baseline information about the organizations, the type of board environment you have, the number of people on your board, and basically what you're looking for. So if you could please fill that out as soon as possible, it would be extremely helpful for us. So this brings me to the end of our presentation, and I'm going to open the mics because I'd very much like to hear your thoughts and reactions. Hopefully you've had some ahas about things that you've learned, things that you feel good about what you're already doing. Maybe you've had some ideas about things you'd like to do differently, and quite possibly you have questions and things that you're still thinking about. So let me open the mics here and just get some of your feedback and questions.
Hi, this is Patricia McLaughlin from the House of the Seven Gables. I have a question and just something that I liked in the presentation that I hadn't seen before. The first thing, my question was about the survey, and did some of us fill a survey out already? I feel like I did.
Yes, it's quite possible that you may have filled it out. It's not a new survey. If you already submitted, if you already responded to the email and filled out the survey, then you're all set.
Okay, thank you. And then one of the things that I liked was in that the matrix. You know, we've had our own matrix in the past, and it always had this kind of elusive, does a person have connections? And I really liked the way it identified different types of connections that people might have, as opposed to just being connected to the community. So I thought that was nice.
Yeah, and right, and this is it's something that, you know, really can serve more as an inspiration than as a there's nothing rigid about something like this. So the more that you and your board can talk about it and tailor it to your own specifics, you know, what's going to matter to you.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much for that. Other thoughts, other comments?
Hi, this is Sarah Stanley.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I appreciate it as a newer EG, you sharing that recruitment, or the fact that you're recruiting doesn't have to be a secret, opaque process. That's something I had kind of wondered about. It kind of feels like announcing you're dating or something. So that was helpful in that then the rigorous screening is where you identify the most ideal candidate. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I actually am familiar with an organization that in a rural area that had a very wide geography that they needed to cover, and they actually took out paid ads, you know, which might be going a little bit farther than many of you would like to go. But thinking about marketing your board opportunities the same way that you market your organization, right? And then thinking about what do we do, as opposed to thinking about how do we twist arms to get people to think about board service, you know, what do we do with the pool of recruits and make a decision from within that pool. That's the ideal situation that you want to, over time, create for yourselves. Yeah. Thanks. Sarah.
Great. Thanks.
This is Nicole McLaughlin from Plumber Youth Promise. And I'm interested in what Sarah just spoke about as well, because I think my hesitation, or I've heard it in my governance committee, about approaching people to see if they're interested, getting an expression of interest, and then telling them, actually, we've decided to go a different direction. So I wonder if that concern has come up for other people, or how that gets managed.
So I have some thoughts, but I'd like to see if others that have had this type of experience have comment or would like to share your own experiences. around that? So I'll take a stab at responding. First of all, I've been on the receiving end of that experience. I was approached by somebody that said that they were interested in me as a potential board member, and then ultimately never followed through. So I think there's a variety of ways to mitigate that. And it really has to do with clarity around expectations. So when you're approaching somebody, say we're trying to put together a pool of candidates for our board, and we would really like to be consider somebody like you. Would you be interested? And here's what our process is going to be, so that somebody knows up front. And then if you're really interested in that person, but right now is not the right time to involve them as a full-on board member, is there another way that you can engage them? For example, could you invite them to join a committee? Could you invite them to join a task force? Is there another way for you to tap that person's interest and engagement so that you maintain the connection rather than having them have a sense that I was passed over? Third might be thinking about a recruitment schedule that spans several years, so that you could talk to people and say, we're looking for people to join in, let's say, 2021, and then the following year. So if it doesn't work out this year, would you be willing to wait a year to come onto our board, right? These are all different ways that you can let that person know that you continue to be interested in them. If that's the case. Now, if you go through a recruitment process and ultimately you find, you know what, this person that we thought was going to be a good fit is actually not, then you just need to be clear about the fact that this isn't going to work out, and we really appreciate your interest. But having a clear process that the person has gone through, and then being able to bring it to a conclusion and not just leave the person hanging, I think are all different ways that you can keep doors open that you want to keep open, and close them in a way that doesn't shut off that relationship with that person when, as inevitably will happen, you find that actually this isn't going to be a good fit. Does that help at all to answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. It's I think people just get uncomfortable, a governance committee member saying, oh, well, should I approach so-and-so to see if they're interested? And at the end of the day, especially if it's somebody they know.
Yes.
And then we go through the process and feel like, well, maybe that person isn't the right fit. They feel like they've put their relationship with the person on the table.
Yes. Yes.
And have maybe created some risk to that relationship.
Right. So what are some ideas that you might have around how to kind of safeguard that, so that because it's, you're not only protecting the relationships of the people in your governance committee with these outside people, but you also need the people on your governance committee to feel that the resources that they brought to the table are valued. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's important. Are there other strategies that you've come up with to try to manage that?
Not yet, but as I'm thinking about it, I guess I'm realizing that if somebody's bringing a personal connection to the table, communication with that person who's being suggested should actually pretty quickly leave the hands of the governance committee who has the relationship and be handed over to other members of the governance committee.
And it might help to have, sometimes these kind of things get complex when there are sort of one-off contacts. So it can help to have a sort of a recruitment schedule, where instead of an individual coming to you and saying, I know somebody and I'd like to approach them, and you're having repeated one-off conversations, it can be helpful to say, we're going to be recruiting the next class of people beginning in X, and we'd be happy to talk to your contact about being part of that class, and going through the process with other candidates, so that it's immediately put into a category of there's more than one candidate, and and obviously talking with that individual about what's going to make them comfortable so that their relationship is safeguarded. I mean, that's paramount. I really, yeah. Are there any other comments or questions? Anything also about the gathering that we're going to have next week? Anything at all that we can answer for you?
Yes, hi, this is Patricia Ho again, and I'm speaking on behalf of several of my boards. One is that we're all seeking to diversify our board membership, and I realize we all know that diversity comes in many different forms. However, I think this gets tricky because you never want to approach someone who is obviously, someone of a real diverse group without them thinking that they're being asked because of that. Probably, I think the first criteria is, would you be interested in our mission? I see that you have really been engaged with us. Maybe that's a way to go about it. But I'm really looking for ways for several of my organizations to reach out to know which other networks to approach to see that we are more representative of the communities that we serve.
So Patricia, I really appreciate your comment, and I think you put your finger exactly on the point, which is that it's very, very important for boards to be thinking about diversity, first of all, in many different facets, not strictly or exclusively about race or ethnicity, age, gender, ability, socioeconomics. There's so many different factors, right? Ability, sexual orientation, etc. But second, and a second point too is that diversifying a board is something that it's very challenging for somebody new to come onto a board, especially somebody that's representing a different ethnic group, a different race, is different in a very profound way from everyone around the table, and be the only one. So thinking about bringing on people in smaller groups, adding 2 or 3 new members at a time, so that there's a class of people, all of whom are bringing different types of diversity, is really the ideal. But how do we break into new networks and make connections to diverse groups of people that we can even approach to think about becoming part of our board? Some of that really has to be about relationship building in the community. It's really not only up to you as board members to be building those relationships, but what is your organization doing to reach out to community members, let's say through the school system, through faith institutions, through other professional networks in the community that might represent groups of people that you're interested in attracting to know more about your organization. Typically, we need people to understand and be connected first to the organization, and subsequently onto the board. And again, Patricia, you said something important, which is, wow, you've been connected. We see that you're a regular visitor, or we see that you have been a regular volunteer, and we'd like to speak to you about considering board service. But you've first built that relationship with the organization to the individual. So it's really a challenge for the entire structure of your organization to take on, and I applaud you as board members for wanting to be part of that. so the idea here is to work with your ED and with staff and so forth to think broadly about how are you expanding the appeal you have to diverse groups of people to start to create a setting that is welcoming and inclusive for people of all different types. I hope that provided some support around the question that you raised.
Yes, thank you.
So I very much appreciate all of you being here today, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person next week. Is there anything that you want to make sure that we talk about when we're together next week that wasn't covered in today's presentation?
Bernadette, what is the format? This is Patricia. What is the format of March 13th?
Well, the specifics, we're still awaiting our final numbers in order to figure out the exact flow of the evening. But we're going to try to keep it relatively informal. But I think we also want to make sure that there's time for meaningful conversation. Meaningful conversation between prospective board members and boards that they're interested in. So ideally, we're going to have profiles that come through not only from all of you on the nonprofit side, but also from all of the individuals, and we'll be able to set up small tables where some of the preliminaries have already been covered. So we know that this individual would be of interest to you, and we know that you would find this individual, or they would find your nonprofit interesting. And then we can create a setting where people will be able to have, ideally, like at least 15 minutes of conversation before another person comes to the table. So you won't be able to speak in an in-depth fashion with everyone there, but we're going to try to create opportunities for you to engage with people who are most interested and that you will find most interesting.
So this is Kara from the Gables as well, following on Patricia's question, not just about the format, but suggested materials to bring.
Yep.
For handouts. I imagine the attendees, the prospective board members, will be receiving, summary information about our organizations.
Yeah.
I know last year when we did this, we brought packets for. I don't know how many packets we brought, maybe 15 for the prospects. Do you have any suggestions for people on how many, how much information to bring?
With your permission, I would like to get back to you on that because I am giving it some thought. I mean, one of the things that we're thinking about is that next week is probably not going to be the place that seals the deal, right, between you and the prospect. And so if it really, for me, raises the question of how much information is really required in that setting and whether it makes more sense to be able to follow up with the person and share the information at a time if there's going to be a follow-up meeting, right? Should you share so would you allow me if you would to just email all of you as a group next week with suggestions around what to bring? As I said, I think you're only going to have an opportunity for a small number of in-depth conversations. We sort of have two ways to go with this. One would be that you bring a lot of information, and even if you don't have a chance to speak to everybody, they can walk home with information about your group. And in some ways that's a plus because they, may have other friends who are interested in your organization and, the word can spread. But I also don't want you to unnecessarily be bringing a lot of information that is not going to deliver the result you want, right? So let me think about that and we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right then, so we're going to close out here. I really appreciate the time that you took to be part of today's webinar. We're going to email a copy of this to you. We're going to also send you the board matrix, and I have another very quick article that I thought I would also include as background reading, very simple about what makes a good board member, things for you to be thinking about as you prepare for next week. We will get back to you, as I mentioned, with more specifics about the evening. It's kind of a basic agenda for the evening and any information that we think would be helpful for you to bring. And I really look forward to meeting all of you. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care now. Bye-bye.